The NFL preseason is underway officially, and that just means that in a couple weeks' time, the regular season is here. So, as we've been doing on GoldSheet TV, breaking down a bunch of NFL futures, we got one more futures episode for you. So, welcome on into GoldSheet TV. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, with my co-host, Dan Alexander at Newbie Talks on Twitter. And after some exciting preseason games, others, not so much. We are getting ready for the start of the regular season. And as we've been doing on this show, we've been breaking down, the division markets, some other general award markets. But now we have some actionable player prop full season bets that we'd like to get into. So without further ado, reminding everybody that the best way to support us is to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And also on goldsheet.com, all three products are now one price. Early bird special, unfortunately gone. So for $1.99, you get every breakdowns on every single NFL and NCAAF game all season long. We're going to hop right into it. So something that Newbie and I were joking about before the show is when we were looking at a lot of these props, it was very hard to find things for running backs because we wanted to, try to hone in on them. But the reality of the situation is the NFL is a passing league. So Newbie, you and I both keened in on some passers this season, and we both came across a couple of things. And where we're starting is looking at one quarterback who actually flip-flop teams. We're looking at Geno Smith and Russell Wilson. We'll start with you, though, Newbie. You have a great position on Russell Wilson under passing yard total. We saw him play in the preseason, and it's kind of obvious to see that we don't expect much progression from him. Talk to me about all things Russell Wilson. What do you like or what do you don't like about him this season?
Well, I think for me, it's not that I am really, disliking anything for Russell Wilson. It's more just I don't understand. I'm not buying into the Sean Payton's going to resurrect Russell narrative. And when I look at the number for his total passing yards sitting at 37.50.5 for this season, that tells me that narrative is baked into that number, because couldn't there just be a reality, and it being this reality, where Russell Wilson's teammates just don't really believe in him and don't really think that he is the guy to get them where they're going? That's what it seems like when you see that he was sacked 55 times last year. And sure, they upgraded that offensive line, but that's no guarantee that it's going to make his life any easier. And again, I'm not going to put much stock into preseason play, but as Eric astutely said there, it wasn't like his eyes made you pop out of your head when you saw him on the field for the Denver Broncos this past weekend. But back to what we are going to see in the regular season. And as I said, 3,750.5 yards. That tells me that the odds makers are thinking that there's potentially this resurrection coming. But even when Russell Wilson was good, he hasn't gone over this number since 2020. He has only gone over this number 5 times in his 11-year career. So more often than not, sure, it's only around 55%, but he's going under this passing total. And that's when he was Russell, who could be helped cook. So there's also a reality where Sean Payton, coming in as a new head coach, isn't tied, that his boat isn't tied to Russell Wilson. And there's a reality where he can wash his hands of him and say, hey, Russell, we're going to put you on the shelf here for a little bit. And then if he doesn't start in 1 or 2 games, I don't see how he goes over this number. So a sketchy number. I have a lack of confidence in Russell Wilson. And I also have a sense that there's some narrative baked into this line. And I never want a narrative driven line. All of that, Eric's making me go under the 3,750.5 for Russell Wilson on passing yards this season. That's my first prop of the day.
Yeah, I think you made some great points there, because looking at, first of all, who even went over that number last season? You have Mahomes, Herbert, Brady, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow. Jared Goff now has a great situation with the offensive line. Josh Allen, Geno Smith in his breakout, and Trevor Lawrence, right? So you're asking Russell Wilson to completely reestablish himself at the top of the NFL quarterback hierarchy, which from what we saw last year seems like a stretch. And also, like you mentioned, their offensive line is solid. They added Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey. I like Powers, but McGlinchey, I think the reason why the 49ers, who have their own offensive line problems themselves, let him walk is because they didn't think he was a good player anyway. So I'm with you on this one completely. I see that it's minus 140 at that number. And, obviously you don't love tying up too much money in futures with juice, but like exactly what you said, this is a narrative-driven line. Like you're expecting him to come back to being a top 10 NFL quarterback just because of Sean Payton. Like, the numbers say that Russell Wilson's cooked, he's cooked.
Well, and the thing is too, is if you are a little bit more juiced verse like me, like this is a rare situation where I'm going to be tying up my money for a minus 140. I just think this is a really good number, but you also could shop around and find this at a lower number at plus money for the under as well. So I've seen, a 36.25 out there. I like it all the way down to 3,500. So you could shop around. I just feel a little bit better having that extra. Maybe he has one of those vintage Russell games where he goes 300 yards and a couple tutties. So to protect myself from that, I'm willing tying up, an extra 20, 40 cents, even though it's something that I typically wouldn't do. I like that plus money preseason, Eric.
Of course, and he finished with 3,524 yards last season. Of course, the Broncos do have some weapons on the outside, but I'm sure they're going to look to establish the run a little bit more, considering the fact that, people were saying that Pete Carroll didn't let Russ cook. It was for a reason. It's because they need that run game to offset it. And like you mentioned, Russell Wilson getting sacked all the time. A lot of those sacks even being his fault for holding on to the ball too long. The athleticism looks like it's diminishing. I agree with you, asking to get another, 200 or so yards, basically a full game's worth of passing just from being with Sean Payton. I don't know if I see that whatsoever. But a player that I'm honing in on, and this is something that I'm very intrigued in. So we're going from, Russell Wilson to now Russell Wilson's replacement in Seattle, Geno Smith. Everybody's loving Geno Smith this season for a number of reasons. Of course, the fact that, he took the league by storm last year, was part of that elite 4,000-yard passing club last season. Seahawks were in a playoff game and almost, even won that game against the 49ers without that last-minute fumble or late-in-the-game fumble that completely shifted the momentum. But I'm expecting Geno Smith to regress big time this year, newbie. And while the Seahawks are a relatively public pick, and by public, I mean I've seen a lot of people, talking on Twitter that they love the Seahawks to win the West and be, a playoff team in the weak NFC field. I'm not seeing it this year. So two things that I like to look at, or I am looking at for Geno Smith this season. Number one is Geno Smith over 11 interceptions at plus 105. And number two, Geno Smith to lead the entire NFL in interceptions this season at plus 2,000. Looking at the numbers, right? So Geno had 11 interceptions last season, very likely regression candidate because he simply got worse as the season progressed. As more team had more film on him in the Seahawks offense, teams were able to identify that and do better against them. And as good of a story as he was, he got lucky more than any quarterback in the NFL. No QB with at least 300 passing attempts had more dropped interceptions, 14 of those, than Geno. And he also finished with the sixth highest turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL. And they ended up losing the 10th most EPA on offense from turnovers, which doesn't seem that bad, but that could have easily been in the bottom tier if more than 14 of those were converted into interceptions. Now the Seahawks making the playoffs, they have a harder schedule this season. It also includes playing the NFC East, which adds in the Birds defense, Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles, while, of course, the top heavy division, all four of those teams have good defenses. So, newbie, am I crazy to be hating on Geno Smith after what he did last season? Because if you ask me, all the numbers are pointing to regression, and I'm out on the Geno Smith bandwagon.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. You know what I mean? Fool me once. What is it? Shame on you. Fool me twice. I mean, how much of a body of work do we really believe in? And I think, give credit where it's due. They did a terrific job getting a lot out of Geno Smith. But if you can just go back and look at that, a lot of the touchdowns, a lot of the missed interceptions, those are just things that are going to even out. You're always one of the handicappers that I love breaking down luck metrics with. There's a lot of luck in what Geno Smith did last season. And I'm already sitting with a Dak Prescott most interceptions thrown at 10-1. So let me add a little 20-1 action in there because he was sitting at 11 interceptions last year. I think these are both two guys in Prescott and Geno Smith who probably are going to have some struggles just in the turnover department. So I'm with you there, man. I too am not on the thought that now Geno Smith has resurrected his career. So, man, we're a little negative out to start the gate here. So I like it. I hope we at least have one over that we're going to be talking about because we're all about the stresses and the things going wrong. The first over that we have is interception, so it's still negative, even though we're talking overs, man.
Yeah, and just looking at the board from last season, like Davis Mills in a perfect world for the Texans isn't playing because CJ Stroud's good enough. But
Exactly.
as we saw from the first preseason game, I don't know. I don't want to overreact too much, but CJ Stroud looked abysmal, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Dak, who was on the opposite end of the spectrum with Geno Smith, he actually was like all the turnover-worthy plays ended up being turnovers for Dak instead of getting some
True.
luck in his way. So that can go either way. Josh Allen, loose cannon. Derek Carr, new system. We'll see. Cousins. Matt Ryan not in the league anymore. Then you have Burrow, Mahomes, Rodgers. Of course, they're going to throw the football. And then to the 11s, you have Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Geno Smith, and our guy, also Russell Wilson. So you said 14 picks that were dropped. 5 of those get caught. Less than half of those get caught. You're leading the league. Half of those get caught. You're leading the league. Really any other turnout besides the immense luck that he got would have led to Geno being in the conversation. So the only thing that could deter this also is if Geno does start off slow, the Seahawks giving the keys to Drew Lock. And as much as I want to hate on Drew Lock and laugh at that, I mean, we saw what Pete Carroll and co did with Geno last year. So as we know in the National Football League, you can never really rule out anybody too early.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah, right there. So I do have a positive thing to say about a quarterback. It's somebody that this is not going to be a hot take whatsoever. But Justin Herbert should be poised for another fantastic season. His overpassing yards is set at 4,425 and a half. And he also is eligible to be the most passing yards in the league, plus 600, I think, are both looks. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. The Chargers, as we discussed during our AFC West preview, they didn't do much from a roster building perspective this offseason in terms of acquiring talent. That's because the Chargers had a lot of talented players who just didn't play last season.
Mm-hmm.
They were injured. Herbert included, who hurt himself in like week 2 and played throughout the whole season with injury. And he still was one of the top NFL passers. He still finished, I lost my numbers there, but he still finished with second in the league with 4,739 yards. So expecting him to go over this number. There's a couple of things included here. So the injuries, like I mentioned, and now he also has, expecting Keenan Allen to be back. They also acquired Quentin Johnson in the draft, somebody who should be another vertical weapon for them to pair with Mike Williams. Of course, you do have Austin Eckler in the backfield, who will be a yards after catch guy. And even though he's doing a majority of the work, those numbers still go on Justin Herbert's stat sheet. Another big thing is that Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, who was incredible his rookie season, who missed a ton of time last year, is going to be healthy. So I expect a lot of progression from this Chargers offensive line. And also now they have Kellen Moore, who I have my qualms about as an offensive coordinator because I don't think he does a great job, balancing the run and the pass. But what he does really well is throw the ball down the football field.
Yeah.
And with Justin Herbert's rocket arm, the protection they have up front now with a healthy offensive line, and of course Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnson, Kellen Moore was second in neutral game pace last season, and every year that Dak and Kellen Moore were married as offensive coordinator and quarterback, Dak was in the top half of air yards every single season, and there's no reason to think that a better deep ball thrower in Justin Herbert won't be in that same category. Newbie, am I, again, drinking some Kool-Aid on the young, healthy love that Justin Herbert, or, Justin Herbert looks like a star in the making, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the number, you look at the play, and sure, it might seem like it's a little bit chalky, but then you add in that Kellen Moore is now a part of this system. And what does Kellen Moore want to do? He wants to air it out. And then there's a lot of people who are really bullish on Austin Eckler and his potential in daily fantasy as well as season-long fantasy. So people are worried, think about all of the share of the offense that he's going to be taking up. No, what they want to do is get the ball to Austin Eckler out of the backfield. He was targeted 127 times last season, and that was before Mr. All I Want to Do is Pass. Even if Dak Prescott just keeps throwing interceptions, Kellen Moore, it comes to town. So I'm right there with you. I think an offense that already wants to air it out is going to be doing even more so, and there's no reason to think that you're going to see a hiccup in what we've seen from Justin Herbert. I think he's only going to get better. I think this league is now finally turning the page since Tom Brady is out. It's all about, Herbert. It's all about Burrow. It's all about Allen. So I think he's going to do a large, large step forward, and it's hard to step forward even more than he has in his young career. I'm right there with you, man. I wish that we could have some head-to-head, but the cases you're laying out here, they're all making sense to me, brother.
Yeah, the only thing I wish is that the Washington Commanders selected Justin Herbert instead of Chase Young in the 2020 NFL
I'm okay
draft.
with it.
But
I'm okay with
We can
that.
commiserate that about that later as we get into the season, but let's move on to some skill position players. So, like we mentioned at the start of the show, or when I started doing my research, I wanted to, look at all markets, see where I could find value, and it was hard for me to hone in on a running back simply because the NFL is a passing league. Running back, so much injury involved. A lot of what we mentioned. If you're a fantasy player, touchdown vultures. Random, or I shouldn't say random, but backup guys getting goal line carries, or so many things go into the season long aspect when it comes to running backs. You've targeted a running back though that we discussed a couple of weeks ago on this show that you were flirting with, and now it seems as if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. Talk to me about Aaron Jones and why you like him so much this season.
Yeah, I just think, and again, I'm completely with you. Just from a overview perspective of what you want to do with running backs and season long props, I think there's a lot. It's a lot easier to extrapolate what's going to happen with quarterbacks, what's going to happen with wide receivers. So I would suggest, unless you have a play that you love for a running back like I do, in Aaron Jones over 800.5 rushing yards, pick your spots with him throughout the season. There are weekly props that are offered on all of these players. So if you like a player to go over his touchdown, for season long, instead of placing 6.5 at the beginning of the season, and maybe you get touchdown vultured, maybe you end up an injury costing you. Why not find the spots where they're playing the worst rush defense and make sure you place him as an anytime touchdown scorer or nicer plus or money at 2 touchdowns or more in a game. So I'm with you. I would pick your spots with running backs much more than placing them before the season. In that same breath, I think you got to get in on Aaron Jones over 800.5 rushing yards on DraftKings. Numbers are higher elsewhere. That was the best that I was able to see. And you're looking at a guy who, even in a passing first offense, because of Aaron Rodgers and what he looks to do, checking out of plays, Aaron Jones already had last season over 1,100 rush yards, and he's gone over this low number 3 out of his 6 years in his career. And as I kind of alluded to, he'll finally be running Matt LaFleur's offense, which is scary reminiscent of what the 49ers look to do, and that's establish the run to open things up downfield, to open up play action and open up some in-between type things instead of the vertical shots that Aaron Rodgers continued to try and take. And I think this is just a great number because every year that he's gotten 200 carries or more, he's gone over 1,000 yards. And with Aaron Rodgers leaving, I don't think those carries are going to be completely vacated to A.J. Dillon. I would maybe even look towards A.J. Dillon's over as well. But I think the usage is going to climb with bringing Jordan Love along. What's your best friend is a strong run game. This is one of my favorite props heading into the year, and it's not like you have to lay crazy money to do it. So Aaron Jones over 800.5 rushing yards is one of the very few running back props I would place before the year, and it's one I have placed myself.
Yeah, and I could see why. And also just doing like an odd shopping perspective, as everyone should do, make sure you get the best odds on literally every single wager you place. Aaron Jones, 800.5 at one shop, 875.5 at another, and we're talking both legal, books that are,
Yep.
operational in the United States. So definitely do your due diligence there. And if that doesn't show you that there's, opportunity in these markets, like that is a massive difference. 75.5 yards is, a game difference just from the same perspective, though, which is crazy. And I think you made some other great points about just like having a run game is the best way to help Jordan Love come along. It's going to be much easier to take the weight off his shoulders. Packers also have a very easy schedule. And when we talk about running backs, we've spoken about, how we see it in the media everywhere. You have these backs complaining about their lack of, getting these second contracts, and they're just, kind of getting worn and torn after the franchise tag and getting thrown to the side. Aaron Jones already got his second contract, and getting a third as a running back is very difficult. So I could also see a scenario where the Packers kind of run Aaron Jones into the ground, for better or for worse.
Good point.
And in the case of having the over for 800 yards, assuming no injuries, nobody wants to ever wish injuries upon anybody, but assuming no injuries here, Aaron Jones, 800, that seems like a great line to clear.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I don't understand how you're getting 75 yards of value throughout the marketplace. I'm shocked that this hasn't moved up because we talked about this weeks ago and we were like, this thing's going to move up by the time we give our season-long prop previews. So I would be shocked if it stays at this number for sure.
And the juice isn't even like different. Like,
No.
for example, that Russell Wilson bet, there was minus 140 for the 375, and then there was, a little bit of, it was like minus 120. So like a little bit of odds differentiation there. Here it's minus 110 on the 799.5, minus 115 on the 875.5. So, line shopping is your best friend. It's one of the best and quickest ways to get value in this business. But head on over, and I promise we have not done this on purpose, flip-flopping teams, because we're going from a team with Aaron Jones and the Packers that was led by quarterback Aaron Rodgers, now going to the New York Jets, which is now quarterbacked by Aaron Rodgers. But I'm not targeting him. I'm looking at Garrett Wilson to lead the league in touchdown catches. Now, this is, again, a 20-1 long shot, so do with this what you will. But a lot of hype for Wilson in the Jets offense, but it's really easy to see why. Wilson was 8th in targets in the NFL last season without Aaron Rodgers, and now, of course, they go from Zach Wilson, the worst quarterback in the NFL, to a soon-to-be Hall of Famer whenever he decides to tear it up. And looking at just Rodgers' connections with his top receivers, now, I'm not calling Garrett Wilson Davante Adams yet. Davante Adams, of course, is a legitimate wide receiver one of the few in the NFL, but Wilson showed some really amazing skills last season. And looking at all of Rodgers and Adams' seasons together, excluding the first 2 years when Adams, was a little bit of a slow riser, they connected for double-digit touchdowns in 5 out of the 6 seasons, with one of those years Adams leading the league in touchdown receptions. Again, not especially claiming that Wilson is Davante Adams, because that would be a little bit outlandish, but he is on the path there. But looking at Wilson as well, he was 13th in red zone targets last season in the NFL, with 18 targets, and he just converted just 4 touchdowns. So you have a guy who is the clear-cut number one option. I know they have Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall now, so they can, probably establish a bit more of a run game. But when they're throwing the football, yes, Rodgers has, connection with Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, maybe he likes Corey Davis, but Wilson is the clear-cut number one option, and he got the target share that you would like from a number one wide receiver, not only on a play-to-play basis, but in a red zone basis as well. So I think Garrett Wilson could potentially, there's a lot of ways people are trying to attack him over receiving yards, offensive player of the year, so on and so forth. But I think a great way to do it is to look at him to lead wide receiver in touchdown catches, because that is something that's very, very volatile year in and year out. And if this really is the Garrett Wilson breakout season, I would expect there to be touchdowns on the horizon for him.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. And again, like I told you, if there's a big plus money with a lot of zeros behind it, it's not going to take you much to talk me into to riding with you on this one. It makes a lot of sense, and it's also a way to get on one of these season-long props with little risk, because of that nice plus money that you're getting there. That's a sprinkle of your bankroll that could potentially yield you a huge win, cover up some potential rough stretches for you in the NFL season that will likely inevitably come. So that one makes a lot of sense. And you don't have to talk me into doing a 20-1. That sounds great. I will place it as you break down your next prop.
But now let's look at some defensive awards. This is someone that we're not going to homer pick, but we're going to look at Hassan Reddick of the Philadelphia Eagles. Newbie, I see why you love him. How can you not love him? You not love anybody on the Eagles defensive line, but you're expecting another banger of a season from Reddick. His total of sacks, 11.75, so you basically need the 12. What do you see as Reddick's path to getting 12 sacks this season?
Well, I think first and foremost, they play a lot of quarterbacks that likely are going to be giving up some potential sacks. And even if you just look at the Eagles' path to success defensively, it's opening up their edge rushers. And that was a huge reason why they went out and got Jalen Carter. So they have a little bit more of a consistent push on that interior. And sure, people look at that and say, no, they want sacks, really stuffing up. They want run stuffers. No, what they want to do is force you into passing downs and then open up to allow guys like Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. And, you're hearing me mention all of these names. You're saying, Newbie, that's a lot of guys. How are you going to get one guy to get 12 sacks? Well, Hassan Reddick last year was tied second in sacks last season. He was tied only behind Nick Bosa. He ended up with 16 on the year. And the Eagles proved that even with all the mouths that need to be fed when you're talking about sack numbers, Everybody can get to the quarterback. They sacked the quarterback a record 70 times last season. I don't know if they'll be replicating that, but we talked a few weeks ago about how maybe it would be worth a sprinkle for Reddick to have the most sacks in the NFL. But I just think the better way to get at this is ask him to get 12 sacks. It's even money right now, so you're not having to lay any juice to do it, because the Eagles will be a force to be reckoned with up front again. And I think that over 11.75 for Hassan Reddick, who's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder. He didn't even get one vote for Defensive Player of the Year last season, despite the fact that he was just behind Nick Bosa for sacks on the year. This is a guy who's highly motivated. It's a defensive front who was not vacating playing time. They rotate through so everybody stays fresh. Reddick's going to be on the field for passing downs against subpar potential offensive lines. So Reddick over 11.75 sacks, the homer pick that I'm hoping gets home, so then I can victory lap and say, hey, it's not all just homers. But I like this one simply because it's at even money, and simply because Hassan Reddick is a huge part of a front that looks to be around 50 or more sacks this season. So why not pick on a guy who's going to have a lot of those sacks for sure.
It helps when you play the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders twice, because I just did my offensive line
I didn't say
rankings.
I didn't mention the Commanders. That was you. Just
as much as I keep it real with my team, I keep it real with myself. But I just did my offensive line rankings today up on GoldSheet.com. Giants offensive line, 29th in the NFL. Commanders, 30th in the NFL. Yes, my ranking. So there you go. I'm not doing any homer. Maybe if you think they should be 31 or 32, I honestly wouldn't even argue against you. But looking also at Reddick, too, to note is obviously with sacks are something that's very volatile year in and year out, because you can get to the quarterback and get quarterback knockdowns and quarterback hits, but they might not convert to sacks. Reddick, though, had 41 pressures last season, good for 6th in the league, and he had also 10 quarterback knockdowns, which weren't too high in the league, but moral of the story is he's getting pressure, he's taking the quarterback down and getting sacks, and he is getting to the quarterback, which is first step in accumulating sacks over the course of the season. But those are some awards that newbie and I love. That's stuff that I'm looking to add to the GoldSheet.com play. So if you are a subscriber to our pick service on WagerTalk.com, look for some of these plays as well as other futures coming as soon as later this evening. Did not give away all the secrets on the show right here. The GoldSheet team has a bunch of things we're looking at for the NFL future market that will be updated as soon as tonight, realistically, and picks will be going in there as throughout the preseason until the start of the regular season. But on behalf of Dan and I, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. On Thursday, we will be breaking down the NFL preseason Week 2 slate for you guys.
Actual games, baby. We got actual games to talk about, EP.
Dude, I can't believe it. No more baseball for us, for me personally. I know we have Dan and I will be on first pitch later. It'll be fun. But we want to, again, thank everybody for tuning in, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel. It's the best way to help us out and help us grow. Also, last note, we are doing preseason rankings for every positional unit on GoldSheet.com. So far, we are done with the offense, quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, and offensive line all ranked. Defense coming throughout this week, so stay tuned there. We appreciate all the listeners, and we'll catch you guys next time.